one of a presentation I just gave to the Utah music teachers at their state conference up at Thanksgiving Point. For the first part, I'm going to tell you my mother's story of recovering from a hemorrhagic stroke. So there's some interesting things that I learned as I watched her heal and recover from a very severe, very serious hemorrhagic stroke. So here's the story. Back in 2017, so this is pre-COVID, one day my mother was not feeling well, and she told me as we were getting ready to go to church, it was a Sunday, and she said, I don't feel well, I'm dizzy. And I said, okay, you need to stay home. I encouraged her to be in our family room and just rest in a chair or lay on the couch. And so I went off to church with my son, and he came home in the middle and because he was hungry. So long story short, and then I came home at whatever point to check on her, and she was not feeling well and had some nausea, and there was some stomach flu going around. And so I thought, oh, she probably has a stomach flu and it's really hitting her. So we had her rest, and my son and I pretty much stayed next to her all day. We kind of got snacks, and I didn't spend much time in the kitchen or anything. We just stayed with her. And long story short, by several hours later, one of my brothers had talked to her, and he knew something was really off. Something was wrong. And so my son and I took her to the emergency room, and they listened to the symptoms, and long story short, we were there all night long, and they were doing tests and more tests, and at about 3 a.m, they came in and they sat down and they said, we need to talk. And that's the scary part of any medical or emergency room visit. And they said she had a brain bleed, and at that point I didn't know what that meant. And so we asked questions, and long story short, my mother spent 3 days in the ICU, and the family was gathering around. They told us they didn't know she was going to make it. And then after these 3 days in the ICU, they transferred her to the specialty neuro rehab unit at the hospital. And so we were visiting her every day. She wasn't very coherent. She had a hemorrhagic stroke. They told us that a few days later. They've been using the terms brain bleed, and I won't get into a lot of specifics, but she slept a lot, and they would wake her up to eat meals. She didn't eat much. They woke her up to do physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, and the list goes on. And early on in the rehab, in this specialty rehab, the nurses and CNAs, we had told them that she was a pianist, and my mother is an awesome, amazing pianist. She can pretty much play anything. At that point, she was, I believe, 80 years old when she had her stroke, 80 or 81. And so we were having a hard time motivating her to do all these kind of therapies, and she was tired and just wanted to sleep. So early on in those, she was 3 weeks in that neuro specialty rehab for and it was a lot of stroke patients were there. And they wheeled her down to the dining room and wheeled her right up to the piano, and she was, again, not that coherent, but of course she'd played the piano her whole life. And so I don't think I was right there on the first time. I just heard about it. They brought her to play the piano, And she did. And the reports I got was that she played very slowly. So the next time I was there, we went down there and she played, and she had she has a beautiful arrangement of Love One Another, and a piano arrangement. And she's played it in church, and it's wonderful. So at the end of this video, I will put a clip in there of her playing this, because it's worth it. So she did, and she was just mostly one fingering it, and she would wait a lot of beats. I don't know that she was counting beats, but she would play a note, like, and then she would think, and then play the next one, and then whatever thinking she was doing, and then that, and then so on and so forth. So there was a lot of space in between each note. And it was very painful for my siblings and I, our family, because this is a woman who could play basically anything, and was still playing the piano. She's a teacher, performs, and obviously as she's gotten older, that has slowed down a little bit, but plays for church and everything. And this was very traumatic for all of us to watch, that she couldn't play very well. The thing we found so interesting was that it wasn't note perfect, but it was close. There just was a lot of space in between each note. And then I went back and watched a few little videos, and she figured out her left hand, and they took her down every day. And the thing that was amazing is that each day the space between the notes got less and less. And she was quite shaky, but it was like the brain didn't have to think so long in between each note. And then when she was ready, and we didn't really keep a log or whatever, here's how she was. We just knew that every time we went down to the dining room to listen to her play the piano, it was a little bit better each time. And again, the space between the notes got less and less until she was playing it with pretty good rhythm. And so it was like all of these memories of hers were coming back. And she figured out the left hand again, and it's her arrangement, so it was very deep in her soul. And then when she was ready, she began playing the hands together. I remember that she was still retraining the fingers, and so the parts of the piece that maybe were a little bit more difficult, where she had to reach for a left hand, or every once in a while she made a mistake as she was playing through. And this is after many days when she's getting all of this back, and then she would fix that left hand. But she knew exactly how it should be. And even from the first day they took her down there when she was not very coherent, those musical skills and memories were still in the brain, and she had to get something fired up between her brain and her fingers, and then she was able to do that. We all were amazed that we could almost chart her progress just by this one wonderful piece, the Love One Another arrangement that she did. And by the time after 3 weeks in the neural specialty rehab, they transferred her to another rehab, which was just a normal rehabilitation center. And they didn't take her down quite as often to play the piano. And it was a larger, it was a whole center. And so we had to almost schedule times down there, but she did it and got better and better and better, and the rest is history. She had 9.5 weeks in the ICU and rehabs, and then we brought her home, and she continued with all the different physical therapies and speech therapy and occupational therapy. And eventually she started teaching piano again, and after just a few weeks at home, which was another wonderful thing, we were so excited for her. And then, but she was really cautious. She didn't want to play in public yet, and she waited several months until she felt comfortable to walk up to the stand between sitting and then going to play the organ. And that was a wonderful, awesome day when she felt recovered and healed enough in her thinking and her fingers and her heart and all the music. And anyway, that's a precious story. At the end of this segment, I'll have that a video that I did a couple of years later during the pandemic, and we recorded a video of her in her living room, and it's just wonderful. The reason I bring this up is it was interesting, and the topic of these several videos that I'm putting together is how to play through a mistake when we're practicing and performing. So I bring this up because she was obviously in really bad shape from a hemorrhagic stroke. Sat down, and there was a lot, the whatever the neurons, and I'm not a medical doctor, so I won't even go there, but it was a very slow pathway between her brain and her fingers. And the memories were in there, those skills were learned from her whole life, but she had to think very slowly and figure out what was the next note. One of my sisters said she was blown away that she always knew where she was in this phrase of love one another. And so that's just something to think about. I think we can use that concept of taking the time between the notes, and then as the days get past, you can get a little bit better and a little bit more proficient. We can use that concept, and I will talk about that some more later. But that's just this beginning story to explain the concept of how to just play through, and then just keep doing it and get a little better each day, and we just get better and better and better. And really, truly, if you heard her play in those beginning days and weeks, you would say, wow, you might not have even recognized the piece. But she didn't stop in her brain, the way her brain was working. And she tells me she remembers that it was hard at first, but that she played a note, and then her brain was telling her what was the next note, and then the next note. And I believe with this consistency, again, they brought her down to that piano every day, and the consistency, and then doing it over and over, and then lessening the space between the notes, eventually she conquered it, and she conquered it beautifully. So enjoy the performance of Love One Another, knowing that it has a whole 9.5 weeks plus of recovery and healing from my wonderful mother, Carol Larson.